feel like I just found a good rhythm. Found a good rhythm, put in work, practice, getting extra shots up, just, feeling good about myself, and the team is rolling right now. We're all playing together, playing the right way, and, we're figuring something out that could be special.
Bay Area is Draymond Green, and you're listening to Willard and Dibs on 95.7 The Game.
That was Andrew Wiggins. 14 seconds of Andrew Wiggins. Andrew, as soon as that quote was over, he, out of sheer exhaustion, collapsed to the floor. He had never spoken for 14 consecutive seconds before in his life, but we're told everything's okay.
Man.
The Warriors had plenty of team personnel on the scene and helped Andrew recover from his Herculean effort in the post-game press conference.
I see him listed tonight as questionable / press conference.
Right.
So that's rare that you see that.
We're talking about Anthony Davis losing his voice. Don't ask Andrew to say anything tonight. He is out of words.
I do think that what he said is interesting in terms of where they see themselves versus where the fans see the Warriors, because they see themselves as, here we come.
Of course they do.
Like a horse at the top of the stretch when he's a horse. The horse is 4 wide and he, comes around and turn for home and the horse is 6th, but the jockey hasn't even gone to the whip yet and he's got that run in the 4 path and it's like, oh man, look at the 7 horse. In this case, the 10, not 10 horse. And then you get in the stretch and you get deep stretch and then all of a sudden, whoa, you get to the quarter pole, the 16th pole. This horse has a chance.
So let's focus on just those words. How many words is it? We're figuring something out that could be special. 8 words.
Yeah.
You believe him?
Yes.
Do you agree with him?
I do. Now, special, it does not mean we're going to be champions. But to me, special means we're going to win of the last 29. You're now 1-0. You got 28 to go. Let's say that they can finish up 19-9, which means you go 20-9 in the last 29, and you get a 7, and you win the play-in, and you go out and you beat the 2, and you get into the Western Conference semifinals. That to me would be special.
I agree with you.
And not special as it pertains to what we've been through with the dynasty, because that's an unfair bar for this team to reach. But for me, special would be you're playing basketball in May. In May, because the regular season ends about April 18, 19, 20, and then that first round seems to take forever.
Some of this is more functional than emotional, I think. The emotional side to this is, what Andrew said. They figured something out.
Right.
They are a cohesive unit. They are loving on one another, and everybody has figured it out. Snap-a-doodle-doo. Here we go. It's Warrior basketball. The other side to this, and a very good friend just texted this point into me, and he's not wrong. The Warriors' schedule stinks the rest of the way. They've got a bunch of crappy basketball teams on the schedule.
3rd easiest in the association.
They're like, you can glance at what's going to happen between now and the end of March, and the San Antonios and the Charlottes and the Memphises are just flying off the page at me.
Yeah.
Those are wins. Now,
you got 2 Charlottes.
You got 2 Charlottes. You got 3 San Antonios between now and the end of March.
Yep.
Right? Actually, in the month of March, you got 3 San Antonios.
Right.
You get a home and home with the Spurs. Okay?
Right.
You got a Bulls in there. You got a Jordan Poole in there. You got a Chicago Bulls in there. Let's see. What else? A Memphis I mentioned. You got a Memphis in there. You got a couple of Dallases. Those are interesting.
Yeah.
You see what you see there. And sure, sprinkle in the Lakers and the Denver Nuggets, and there's a trip to Boston next week. You got to play the Knicks twice at both places. That's a solid basketball team for sure. Right as you get into April, well, there's Houston, Utah. Look who you end the schedule with, Portland and Utah.
Yep.
I can look at this schedule right now, and if the Warriors just beat the Cupcakes, that's it. Just the Cupcakes. You're playing 500 ball. You're playing 500 ball the rest of the way just with cuppy cakeys. If you just steal a few here and there.
Yeah.
If we say half of those 28 are cuppy cakeys.
I just counted 13,
okay.
So that's a fair ballpark.
So in those other 15 games, win 6.
Right.
And there's your 20-9. that everyone's hoping for to finish the season.
And that gets you to 47 wins, and that gets you sniffing the 6.
Now, are you healthy? Are you healthy? You are right now, and you see what happens. 9 of 11. So they got to stay.
Is he healthy?
Sure. Well, there's others.
Yeah.
Draymond's got to be a part of this.
Yeah. Although when you look at the games that he missed, they were about 500.
Yeah.
And games that everyone's missed, they've been about 500.
Right, but I think not anymore. When you look at who they are right now, this is no longer a team that's going to play 500 basketball if healthy. And I think there are other keys, not just Steph. I think Draymond is one.
Yeah.
I think Wiggins is one. I think Podziemski is one. Like, they need these people. Clay's probably furious that I didn't just mention his name. I'm sorry, Clay, but right? Like that's kind of how I see this right now.
Well, would you name Podziemski before you named Clay?
Yes.
And I mean, yes. I was hoping that you would pause a little bit longer before you answered, but the point of that question is there's no pause needed. So not only did you answer Pods over Clay, it took you 0.7 seconds to answer that, and you're not wrong.
Yeah, no question. He does more. He does a lot more. I'm not saying he's not a better shooter. He's not more explosive, but what you can count on him to bring, here's how I would separate, and again, just right now, today, I would separate Brandon Podziemski and Klay Thompson like this. Klay is a tremendously helpful player when he's shooting well. Brandon is a tremendously helpful player. Sentence over.
Right.
He shot 3 of 12 last night. Tremendously helpful.
Clay was 1 of 9, and he was helpful.
No.
But not tremendously helpful.
Not tremendously helpful. The rebounding.
Yeah.
The the passing.
The defense.
All of that stuff.
Last night was a perfect example of what you're saying because they both offensively were not good. And yet Podziemski did more in terms of rebounding, defense, and all the intangibles.
Now, I love that Klay Thompson went into last night's game thinking pass first. I love that. That's actually probably Klay's best bad shooting game in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
In terms of the way he affected the game. So that's great. And if you can get more of that, Klay thinking about things on the court beyond his shooting, that's a huge win. And I think that's part of what Wiggins is, that's part of what he's saying. Figuring something out. It does feel like roles are coming into place. Feels like roles are coming into place, which is why I will also rebirth what I said yesterday, my concern and the return of Chris Paul, because roles are being defined and he's not a part of it. And I don't want him to come in and undefine the roles again.
Well, he will be a part of it. And that's where that's why Steve Kerr is the best in the business, is because he's going to figure out a way to make Chris Paul a part of it. And I also think that based on what we've seen from Klay this year and Steve being able to tell Klay, look, Klay, you're not going to start anymore. You're going to come off the bench, and being able to make that okay. And remember, he was able to go to Chris Paul at the beginning of the year and tell Chris Paul what his role was going to be. And I mentioned this back in September and October. Chris Paul had never come off the bench as an NBA player ever in his life. He had never come off the bench. And Steve was able to get to Chris Paul and say, this is your role. You're coming off the bench. Yeah. So if he sees Chris Paul as a 12 or 15 minute a night guy now, based on what we're doing,
thumbs up.
Steve's going to be able to sell that to him. If
agree.
Steve thinks he's 24 to 28 minutes a night, then that's what Chris will do. But if it doesn't work out for Chris, then Steve will be able to get to Chris and say, we're going to scale you back because Brandon's better, Klay's better, Lester's better, etc.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying, but Chris Paul and Klay Thompson are in different positions. I don't know how many things need to be sold to Chris Paul in terms of his role. I don't know what was really promised on the way in. He's 38 years old. They're 9 of 11 without him. Chris is going to do whatever the hell they tell him to do. And I think from a mental standpoint, because of where he is in his career and the fact that he doesn't have this history with this team, there's just not a lot to say there. Klay's mental side needed to be massaged for a lengthy period of time. A lengthy period of time. And I don't blame him for that. This is a Hall of Fame player. He has a nickname right next to Steph Curry. The idea of moving him to a bench role, the injuries he's been through, this is one unbelievable set of mental gymnastics. And so I don't blame Clay for that, and I credit him for sort of what it looks like arriving where he's arrived. But it had to go through that. That had to be a process. When Chris gets healthy, 25 games to go, team's humming, you look at Chris and you just say, bud, this is what we're doing. And I don't want to really, I'm not saying Steve would do it this way. This is what we're doing. There does not need to be a discussion about
Well,
this.
Steve already had that discussion, and that was my greater point about Steve Kerr is when Chris Paul came in, he had that discussion with Chris in terms of what he was going to do and his role in this team and what that was going to be. So when he comes back now from injury, that conversation is an easy one because Chris Paul has already come off the bench. And if the conversation now is, gee, Chris, Pods has turned into, Chris sees what Pods has done.
Sure.
Chris is not coming back thinking, all right, Brandon, cute little run, nice little impact, but it's my time.
38-year-old CP3 is here.
Chris Paul he's the point guard, and he's a smart player, and
Sure.
he knows what this team has done without him. So I don't think he comes back expecting to get 28 to 32 minutes. And
No.
I'm sure Steve Kerr will have the appropriate conversation and say, okay, this is where we are. This is where I see you. And, if you play well, you might be able to get back to where we were. But right now we're humming.
And I'm not even against him closing some games because of the way the Warriors have closed games this year.
Right.
They're terrible at it. And so I definitely think Chris can be kind of a standby for the closing lineup. And if I'm Steve Kerr, that's one thing I would do a little bit quicker when there's 7 minutes to go in the game and you're up by 11 and it starts going sideways, react. Know that it's going to keep going.
Right.
Because it's happened so many times. And I would use Chris for that role in emergency break glass and put Chris Paul in because he's a stabilizer like that. But he's also not much of a rebounder. And I tend to feel like when they're blowing things in the fourth quarter, that's the number one answer on the board as to why. And Podziemski is not just their best rebounding guard. He's one of their best rebounders, period. End of sentence.
Right.
So, Randy and Milpitas. Hey, Randy, you're on Willard and Dibs. Love to take all your calls today. What's up, Randy?
Hey, gentlemen, how we doing today?
What's up?
Hey, so I wanted to follow up, a couple quick recap things that I saw last night. I saw the Warriors run. It's the first time in a while that I've seen them get after the ball on both ends of the floor. Yes, their turnovers are always going to be an issue, even during the championship runs. But one thing that I noticed last night was they were passing up good shots to make to great shots, right? And that really opened up the floor for a lot of our shooters. Even though Clay had an off night, Steph was able to come through, Paz was able to come through, and allowed a lot of our other guys to really spread the floor. That being said, let's just fictitiously talk about, getting into, six seed, 7 seed. We're playing late, against some of the juggernauts like the Nuggets. Do you guys foresee our bigs, Saric, TJD, Draymond, and Looney being able to handle, a 7-game series with the Nuggets or someone with another power forward / center that could really take over the game?
This is a really good question, Randy. It's a very fair question because let's not forget how things ended against the Lakers last year. We did not walk away from that series at the time. Maybe we were wrong, but I don't think most of us walked away from that series going, Warriors aren't good enough. I think we walked away and said Warriors aren't big enough. I think we felt like that was a matchup issue.
Yeah.
And maybe we were being myopic to a certain degree, but the Lakers weren't a great team last year either. I think the Warriors would have gotten beaten by Denver also had they defeated the Lakers and moved on. But I didn't walk out of the Lakers series and go, God, they just can't play with that team. I felt like they couldn't rebound with that team. And, Randy's right. There are some teams. It's interesting now. I'm listening to Gary St. Jean this morning with Bonte and FP, and he's like, the old adage is that a good small team beats a good big team because there's a matchup disadvantage at the other end of the floor too. So that Minnesota, Denver idea, I don't know. I know what it looked like at the beginning of the year, and the Warriors couldn't handle it. But they're a different team now, And would they be, they're a little bit more prolific offensively. Would they be able to tilt that quote unquote disadvantage in the other direction? Best thing I can say is maybe.
Right. I do think that adage is a little bit dated because now in Minnesota's different because they're big guys. Like Rudy Gobert is a classic old school big, but Karl Anthony Towns is a 7'2" guard. He doesn't play like your traditional big. So the idea of that adage where a good little team beats a good big team doesn't really fit when you've got big players who can play like small players. And Anthony Davis at times can play little. He can go out on the perimeter and he can cause problems out there. You know that the Joker, he doesn't play like a 6'11", 280-pound back to the basket big. He plays like a small forward the way he goes about it on the perimeter, scoring at all three levels. So the adage I don't think necessarily fits in terms of classic bigs and classic smalls. I do think that Minnesota is a team, though, that can be neutralized based on their two bigs because Rudy Gobert, go ahead and leave him open on offense.
Not worried about him. And listen, even though he's undersized, even up to this minute, if you gave me like you could have 3 or 4 players in the NBA that you want guarding Karl Anthony Towns or Nikola Jokic, one of my selections will be Draymond Green.
Yeah.
I don't care that he's 6'6", sure, 6'7", air quotes.
He's
whatever.
6'5", maybe.
Whatever. Like that's one of the guys I would pick. And the Warriors have him, and he seems to be maybe in the best headspace he's been in 2 years.
Yeah.
Is that probably accurate? Maybe even more, because I know they won a title less than 2 years ago, but don't forget what was going on in those playoffs. He was admittedly struggling at times dealing with the voices, Boston's crowd, all of that. Like he said at times, they got to me.
Yeah.
I feel like, and maybe it's too early to say this, but the things that we were concerned about in December and January, where we were questioning the future of Draymond's career and whether or not it was time for the Warriors to move on. Look, this is still a relatively small sample, but dude, since he's come back, he's crushed it. He's crushed it on
been amazing.
Not just basketball. Like he has found that tiny little path of, I'm going to have my head totally screwed on straight. I'm going to be aware. I'm not going to get into the officials, but I'm still going to poke enough at the opponent to tick them off. It's been impressive. It's been absolutely what you want him to be at his best.
And there's a certain amount of freedom that comes with being at the end of the rope where, you know, it doesn't matter now what he does in as far as like, if you have another incident, well, now you're probably gone for the rest of the year or maybe longer. So there's a certain amount of freedom that comes with being at the end. Like when you're playing golf and you know, you play the front nine and you shoot a 52, it's like, okay, who cares? I'm not going to set my own personal record. Just go out and play. And then all of a sudden you go out and you play and you make a couple of pars and you sneak in a birdie and it's like, okay, good back nine. You're playing free. There's no pressure. You're not thinking about the what if. And Draymond's got 4 rings and now he knows that the next time he does anything, it might cost him his career. So just don't do that. Take that part of it out and just go play. You can still be the Draymond that you want to be. And Steve even said to us, and I'm sure he said it to Draymond even more forcefully, I still want you to agitate and talk to officials and advocate for calls. Just stop hitting people.
It's so funny.
I mean, it is, but
Could you just stop hitting people, please?
I mean, do everything you want to do.
Oh.
Just stop hitting people.
No, but also, like, just be a little bit more aware with the refs.
Sure.
Just be a little bit more aware of how you talk to them, when you talk to them, how loud it is, how intimidating it is. Like, just right. Be aware of that.
But even the Nurkic thing, when he played him again, and Nurkic scored on him and did the "you're so little," and then Draymond scores back and he slams the floor. Like, yeah, that's how little I am.
Come on.
That stuff is all good.
That's great.
But it wasn't getting in his face and like, oh, I don't know, choking him out.
I always feel like certain personalities, and this is true, this is why parenting, for example, that's my, world. That's why it's so damn hard. Everybody, every human, good God. Every human needs something different to get the best out of them. This is, again, like, why do you back up the coaches all the time? Because it's hard. Because it's hard. And what we as fans ask of them is often not possible. Hey, Kyle, know which play will work every time. And know which players will go the wrong way. Like, okay, hey, Steve, you got to know when Wiggins is going to shoot the ball and it's not going to go in before it happens. Okay, like, seriously, what are we talking about here? Steve Kerr has actually done an unbelievable job this year. If you really want to step back for a minute and take a look at what's been asked of him and what's been needed of him. And Draymond Green, as the example we're talking about right now, what gets the best out of people is different for every person. And maybe Draymond is one of these people. I know a few. I'm not one of them, but I know a few, and there's nothing wrong with this. Some people will not get in line until they really, truly believe and have been shown this is your last chance and we're not budging anymore. And Draymond, I think, with an indefinite suspension, finally believed that. I think he has lived his entire career with, sure, what are you going to do about it? Stop me. What are you going to do about it? And the league and the Warriors have been rightfully criticized at times for being soft with Draymond. Okay, Draymond, don't punch a teammate. Like, we're not going to suspend you or do anything at all, but that was bad. Don't do that. Well, you're telling the person you can do whatever you want and there's not going to be any ramifications. The NBA finally did something that made Draymond go, okay, all right, you have my attention.
Man, the team didn't do that 2 years ago.
Correct.
And the league did.
And it worked.
So far.
I think he believes it now.
So
don't you?
far, so
good.
good.
Yeah, so far.
Yeah,
watch him tonight.
As a fellow anger management survivor,
Yeah.
it is a day-to-day battle.
No doubt. Always. Isn't everything?